What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike, and today I'm back with the much anticipated, surprisingly, part 3 of my video series titled What It's Really Like to Be Homeless. I am sufficiently mentally uplifted today to hopefully get through what is actually one of the more difficult parts of this story, primarily due to the fact that after you've just been awake for 30 consecutive days and then slept for 3, memory becomes a bit dodgy. And so I actually had to I just got off the phone with my dad, actually, trying to help him, trying to get him to help me piece together some of the parts that I'm going to be discussing in this particular video. This is a very difficult time to recall because the volume of drugs being used is extraordinary, and the amount of time that I was spending awake was also extraordinary. So the thing that you have to first understand, if you've never abused amphetamines before, is that when you stay up for multiple days on end, whether that's a few days, a week, 2 weeks, a month, it all feels like one day to you. So the human brain, it marks days not so much by the rising and setting of the sun. Our internal clocks seem to more be focused on the time periods between when we last slept, like got a full night's rest. And so it's actually a remarkable thing that I'll probably talk about later in this video. When you when you stay up, for example, for 7 consecutive days, especially if you do it in proximity to somebody who is not tweaking, where you watch them wake up and go to bed 7 consecutive times during a period of time, this can be a mind fuck because it's all one day to you. And so it makes trying to come up with a chronological history of events very difficult, as you might imagine, because chronological events are based on calendars, and those kind of cease to have meaning when you stay up for extended periods of time. Never minding the fact that your memory is fucked anyway. So where I left you, I had just woken up from a 3-day slumber at my grandparents' house in Dallas, Texas. And so I can't remember. I'm sure they probably fed me dinner. If I remember correctly, I woke up in the late afternoon, early evening, 5:30 or 6 o'clock. This was coming into the fall when this occurred. It was probably sometime in late October-ish. So the weather in Dallas can be hit or miss. Sometimes it's warm, sometimes it's cold. And so they probably fed me food. I hadn't eaten, and I was wraithly fucking thin. And then, like, kind of what I always did when I went to visit my grandparents was just kind of sit on the couch, and my grandmother and my grandfather were married for like 75 years. They had known each other since they were 12. They grew up on the same street or earlier. I think they grew up on the same street. They got married when they were 18. My grandfather went off to war. He flew bombing runs over Japan in World War II. He came home. My grandparents were married forever. They were like my the poster children for what I thought a marriage was supposed to be. Ultra right wing conservative, racist. Honestly, they were very racist. I heard a lot of. I was exposed to a lot of racism growing up. Just like down south, white, old school, conservative fucking people. Hard people. Both my grandfather and my grandmother were just hard people. My grandmother was a brilliant woman, and she was not a bullshit artist. She was a lot like me, actually. I got a lot of my personality from my grandmother. She was no bullshit, look you dead in your eye, tell you exactly the fucking truth, whether you wanted to hear it or not. She didn't pull any fucking punches, and she didn't play any fucking games. There's probably never been another human being on this planet that I respected more than my grandmother. So here I sat on their couch, and you have to understand, 30 days of consistent meth use and staying awake, and then you sleep for 3 days, you're still not even a human being. I don't even know how. Honestly, I don't know how I was alive. I think meth is almost like the zombie apocalypse virus. It's like the T virus. It seems to animate what should be otherwise dead flesh. Like I had no good reason to be alive at this point. I was surviving on the occasional Oreo cookie shake or like bottle of orange juice or maybe a donut that my buddy Steve or Nick or whoever I was running around with at the time could get me to force down my face. And so I sat on their couch and I basically explained to them what had been going on in my life, that I'd had a falling out with a friend. And, with my grandmother, it was always a confessional, man. Like, that's kind of like, sitting here talking to this camera is almost like talking to her. Like, there was no reason to lie to her. She was going to know if I was lying. She could read someone's body language better than most CIA spies. And so when you were sitting on Mama's couch, it was like, it was a come to Jesus meeting every single fucking time. And so I narrated some version of the story, I guess. And you have to understand, like I said, my grandfather was like the hardest guy I'd ever met in my life. He was also absolutely no bullshit. He was a man of very, very few words. He rarely spoke. I was scared to death of the guy the majority of my childhood. He was just ultra right-wing conservative. I don't know how else to explain it. Just, hardcore dude. Rarely smiled, never showed any emotion. Most of the time I was sitting over there talking to my grandparents, he would just be silent. He would add a tidbit here and there. My dad would come to visit. They would talk about sports and work. The man just sat in front of the fucking TV and just watched sports all day long. He played golf. He did other things, but he was just a very hard dude. And so I'm sitting here, and it's getting later in the evening, and I'm retelling the story of what I've been up to, and I look over, and my grandfather's crying. And that shit, like, knocked out the whatever was left of my soul at that point, I think. I had never in my lifetime seen this man cry about anything. And suddenly I look over, and he is losing his fucking composure. And I was so numb from all the drugs and the sleep that I couldn't even have an emotional reaction to his emotional reaction. It was almost like I couldn't even understand why the man would be crying. Like, what's wrong with you, Papa? And I can't remember exactly what he even said to me, but it was something like there's a skeleton sitting on my fucking couch right now. Like, I cannot believe what I'm looking at. He was just like, I don't understand what you're doing to yourself. I can't, he had never done a drug in his life. He'd never taken a risk in his life. It seemed like he was just so straight-laced, ultra anal retentive. He drank liquor a little bit. He was just so fucking conservative in every sense of the word. Go to church every Sunday. Just pay your bills, pay your taxes. 100% trust the government. Just drank the fucking Kool-Aid all the fucking way. And so I didn't even know how to react. The guy was sitting there fucking crying, and I was just kind of like, man, I don't know, I'm good. I like getting high. I don't know what to tell you. It feels good. And so this conversation was basically going nowhere, and eventually my grandparents were like, well, you can't stay here. We're sorry that you're on bad times. And they said there's someplace you can go, and I was like, I think, again, they hadn't called my dad. It was not unusual for me to go to my grandparents' house to visit them. And my dad knew that I didn't really have a vehicle, obviously, because, he let my car get repossessed. And so to the best of both of our recollections after the phone call we just had, I must have called him from their house and said, hey, can you come get me and drop me at a friend's house? So apparently he came over there and picked me up. I think they sent me out the door, in fact, because they didn't want to even connect these two visits or whatever. Again, my grandparents were the kind of people who would be ashamed of you. They would be ashamed. Sometimes they were ashamed of their own kids, because my grandparents were real religious, and all of their kids had multiple divorces, and that shamed them. They felt like that brought embarrassment on the family, that their kids had unsuccessful marriages. And so again, if it shames you because your kids got divorced, you can imagine how they felt having a fucking tweaker grandson that was dying in their bedroom. So my dad comes and picks me up, and he takes me. I told him, hey, can you give him directions to this apartment? And he takes me and he drops me off at my buddy Steve's apartment, who I originally was going to change names but failed in my previous video. And so I walk up just hoping this dude is here, and I walk up and knock on his door unannounced. So it's really kind of a fucking no-go. Like, that was really not what you did. And I knock on his door, and I think he came to the door, and he's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing here? And I was like, man, Nick and I had a falling out, man. I kind of need to talk to you. And he's like, get the fuck in here, whatever, come on. So I go into Steve's apartment, and of course he's like, hey, you know what, you want a line, whatever. I'm sure we fucking did some lines, and I was like, man, I'm just going through it. And he was real. Steve was real, like, again, he was like a father figure to me. He was real hands off. I don't know how to explain this guy. He was just like, I don't know, man. Like, he was super fucking cool. One of the coolest dudes I ever fucking met. And we just, I don't know, like, our personalities were just perfectly fucking in sync. The thing is he was like a drug dealer with a heart, is what it was. It was like one of these really like, drug dealers have such a bad reputation as being pushers and these scumbag low-life pieces of shit. And this was not Steve. He was the polar opposite of that. He was like a really good guy who just happened to sell drugs. He loved speed like I did. He had all of his clients. He didn't do business with low-life pieces of shit. Like, he had good clientele that was all like soccer moms and actual police officers, and he sold to like blue collar, like normal kind of people. Like, he wasn't dealing on the corner to fucking crackheads living on the street. Like, everybody we dealt to, they were all like high functioning drug addicts, basically, is I guess the best way to explain it. He didn't fuck around with riffraff and losers and people who were just like totally lost. Everybody he dealt with had jobs and families, and they were maintaining some kind of semblance of normal fucking reality. And so here I am, the guy who's basically becoming homeless. And so we're playing darts and shit, and I get to talking to him. He can tell that I'm kind of like dancing around, like, what's going on? And he's like, why, what's up with you and Nick? And I was like, dude, like, I just can't trust this guy, and things went bad. I'm kind of trying to dance. I don't want to fucking basically snitch on anybody. Like, I'm trying to avoid saying anything, but I got to justify why I'm here, and I've got to account for why Nick and I had this falling out, because obviously he had the relationship with Nick first, and so I've got some explaining to do, basically. And finally I got around to it. I was like, look, dude, I'm not trying to cause any problems, but I gotta let you know, like, Nick is a fucking hustler, bro, and he hustles all day, every day. This is what he's been up to, and he's been fucking you around too. Like, these speakers that he's got me over here installing are not worth anywhere near what he claims they are. Like, this guy's no good, man. And I just fucking I wigged out. I couldn't fucking take it, and so. He takes this information in. He was not the kind of guy who was like prone to fucking bouts of anger or shit, but at the same time, he was not the kind of guy you fuck around with. I have never seen a firearm arsenal bigger than this fucking dude had. I mean, we're gonna get into it in this series of videos. Holy mother of fucking Christ. This guy could have knocked off Fort Knox with the guns and ammo he had in this apartment. 2 big ass fucking floor safes, and the entire trunk of his fucking car were loaded to the hilt. And I'll be going in detail into everything this guy had, what we used to play around with. So basically, long story short, I basically confessed to this guy what's been going on, and he's like, fuck that. I'm not gonna let you be in this environment. Fuck this guy. That's not the kind of fucking people I deal with. He was like, I don't even give a shit about these fucking speakers. That's fucking small potatoes to me. He was like, you can fucking stay here tonight. And he was like, I've got some people I'm gonna go see in the morning. If you want to go with me, man, you can roll with me. And so basically this started a relationship that would last for some unknowable period of time that was one of the most transformative relationships of my entire life. So basically, like that, I went from being Nick's guy who was his right-hand man running around basically like his just like fucking, I don't know, spare third fucking wheel, you know, to being the guy who was right next to the guy. So Steve was getting his product directly from the fucking cartel in Mexico. The cartel would send their fucking agent or whoever to meet him at a location that is irrelevant, and he was buying large quantities of absolutely pure, uncut crystal methamphetamine made back in the good old days. There was some Reds, some Freds, and some I's. Anybody who knows about that maybe knows what that means. It was good, high quality crystal meth. And so Steve had his clientele basically split into two groups. The people who got the pure, uncut, unadulterated product because they could handle it, and the people who were on their way to not being clients anymore, who got the stuff that was slightly stepped on because they could not fucking handle it. And that was Steve's big thing, is I don't play around with fucking clackers and fucking tweakers and people who can't fucking, you have to be a high functioning drug addict. I'm not going to prison over some stupid fucking bitch or some fucking nut going out in the streets and acting like a fucking idiot, because all it takes is one person to get popped and point the fucking finger and the gig is up. And so he had made a career, for lack of a better term, of not dealing with these kind of people. And so anybody that started to get too dodgy, too fucking shady, he would cut them off cold fucking turkey. And so there was two sides to his business, and we dealt with both sides until somebody had to be cut off. And so the next morning, sun comes up. We've been throwing darts all night, bumping lines, and I've been bumping lines. And sun comes up, and he's like, you know, like, you want to go? I got to roll. You want to go with me? Yeah, man, let's fucking go. I got shit else to do. So I hop in the car with him, and basically what happens is I become his right-hand man. So we start basically running clients. And that's what we did for 2 weeks fucking straight, was about how long he would run. He would go on effectively 2-week running sprees where we would just be going 24 fucking hours a day running clients. So we would get in the fucking car. We would drive to a fucking client's house. It was almost always a house, sometimes an apartment, but primarily these people were living in houses, and most of them were living in nicer parts of the fucking of the city. And so we would pull up, and we would go into somebody's house and be in their living room, their garage, their fucking backyard, wherever. And this is when I learned to smoke, because basically, you know, when you're doing these kinds of deals, especially when you've got a new face in the fucking crowd, this makes people a little bit uncomfortable. And so they want to know that you're somebody they can fucking trust. And so we would sit down, for example, at a coffee table with somebody who was buying product, and he would load up a bowl and melt it down, and we would pass it around. We'd all sit around and get high, and then he would do his transaction, and we would usually kick back and hang out for a little while, because again, coming and going, you know, really quickly is number one way to get popped. So if you're smart, you don't go in and out of houses a lot. So pretty much everywhere we went, it was kind of like a fucking friendly situation. So sometimes they would have dartboards, or you know, some you know, they'd be playing like video games or whatever, and we would sit and we would kind of pass the bubble around. He would do his deal on the side, and we would sit and pass the bubble around, and then we would get in the car and we would go to the next place. And so again, I had started out with this tiny little fucking, you know, I got into this game because somebody gave me a tiny little bit for free, and then a skip and a hop and a jump, and now I'm sitting next to the man, and we're dealing all over Northeast Dallas. And so, you know, we'd be there for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, however long it took. We'd get in the car, and we'd go to the next spot. Same thing everywhere we went. Somebody's garage, somebody's kitchen, somebody's living room, sitting around playing video games, just shooting the shit, pass the fucking bubble around. So every fucking house we fucking hit, I'm fucking hitting the bubble. Everywhere we go, like, you're just constantly going. And so I am just rip-roaring all day, every day. We would go see a few people, and then he'd be like, "Hey man, you want to go? You want to go? You want to go to the gun range?" I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, you ever shoot guns?" And I'm like, a couple times. And he's like, I got you. So we used to go to this gun range in Garland, Texas. I forget what it's even called. And this dude pulls up to this fucking gun range, and he pops the trunk of his fucking car, and holy fuck. Dude, the first time I looked in this fucking trunk, I like to shit down my fucking leg. I thought this guy has got to be a fucking narc or something. No sane human being. All of his drugs, he kept in a Pelican case. That was like double locked Pelican case. So all the shit was in a Pelican case. And then he opens this fucking arsenal up. And there are assault rifles and pistols and shotguns and fucking this duffel bag full of more ammo than you can fucking imagine. And so, again, trying to make sense of the time scale of this is impossible. But I can tell you over the course of the period of time that I hung out with this guy, that in his arsenal that I personally fucking shot many, many rounds out of was SKS, AK-47, AR-15, Tech-9, Uzi, Glocks, Sig Sauers, Smith & Wessons, revolvers, 380s, 9mm, 40 calibers, 45s. He had these two badass, fully fucking modified 22 rifles. We used to go to this fucking gun range, just fucking ripped. And he would buy fucking Osama bin Laden targets. And he had these two 22 rifles with bipods and fucking scopes on them. And if you could get a box of 522 rounds for $10 back then. And we would just sit at the fucking gun range, ripped off out of our gourd, shooting smiley faces and shit on fucking Osama bin Laden targets and fucking shooting dicks. Like I was as good of a shot on speed as I was at throwing darts. Like fucking surgical with these motherfuckers. I shot more guns than you could fucking imagine. He had ammo for days. And I'm like, dude, how do you afford all this shit? Apparently during this period of time, which again it was 2001, it was immediately post 9/11 era. And he bought military surplus. He had been buying military surplus rounds. So he had the 7.62 by 54 millimeter NATO rounds. Is that right? The AK-47 rounds, the 5.56 rounds for the AR-15s. He had 40s, 45s, 380s, fucking everything you can imagine. Boxes of 22s. He had two different kinds of shotguns. He had like the Benelli style folding fucking stock shotgun. He had some fucking Remingtons and some I shot Super Mag shotguns. I mean, we just shot thousands of fucking rounds of ammo at these gun ranges. And so this was basically what I did for at least the next 2 weeks straight. So we would just go from house to fucking house. We would do our deals, twist the bubble, get high, go to the gun range. He would go fucking eat. I wouldn't. He was always trying to force feed me shit. The one thing I would eat was donuts in the morning and I would drink orange juice. He could usually get me to suck down an Oreo cookie shake. But the whole time was just riding with this dude. We used to go, like one of the things he introduced me to, I don't know how much of this shit I can even get away with talking about on here, but one of the things he introduced me to, we went to see this guy. This was one of the more fucked up stories. Maybe I can have time to get this out before the clock runs out. I will never forget as long as I live. We went to see this guy who had come down from Oklahoma, and he was like a friend of one of Steve's clients, and this guy was an older guy. He was like in his late 40s, at least, maybe early 50s, and he wasn't in very good shape. And so we go over to this hotel room these people had, and Steve loads up a bowl. We pass the bowl around, and the guy's like, "Man, I'm not really feeling it." Or he was like, "Hey, can we do it again?" We'd already sold product, whatever, and so we passed the bowl around again, and the guy's like, "I don't know, man. I'm not really feeling it." And I'm like, dude, like, you're feeling it. Like, what do you mean you're not feeling it? He's like, it's my money, and I'm telling you I'm not feeling it. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right, cool. And by this time, I've developed a rapport with Steve, and I think this is probably getting out of chronological order, but ultimately it really doesn't matter. And so Steve was like, okay, well, do you want to do a hot rail? And so in case you don't know, a hot rail is where you take a piece of Pyrex glass and you bend it kind of like this. You bend it let's see if I can get this photo. You bend it kind of like this. And so you've got your line. You've got your line that you put down here on the table. And then you take a torch and you heat this corner of this Pyrex glass up until it's red fucking hot. It's glowing red hot. And then you stick this part of the Pyrex glass up your nose and you snort the line up the Pyrex glass. And when the line hits that red hot piece of the Pyrex glass, it instantaneously vaporizes. And so rather than snorting the crystal, you snort the vaporized meth right up your fucking nose. I'm not sure why this is hugely different than smoking it, but what is significant is when you smoke it, like if you load a bowl with say 30 cents, 0.3 grams, and you're passing this around and everybody's puffing off of it, everybody's basically sharing 0.3 grams of crystal meth. In this case, we broke this guy out 0.3 grams on the fucking table, and he took that shit to the dome in one fell swoop off that fucking hot rail. And he fucking tells me after the fact, he's still not feeling it. So I'm starting to get kind of fucking hot, honestly. I'm like, look, dude, you must have done a fucking gram of dope sitting here in fucking front of me. Like, I don't know what you're trying to insinuate here, okay? But like, why don't you give it a minute? And so at this point, dude starts getting kind of quiet. So me and Steve and this girl, we're all fucking kind of hanging out, just chilling. We're bullshitting. We're trying to ignore Grandpa over here who can't feel it. This is why sometimes when people are on my fucking YouTube channel talking about I don't feel the trend, I'm like, what? And so, we hang out for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I don't know how long we're there. And then it's coming up 11:30. It's time to turn the keys into this room they've rented. And so Steve is like, hey man, come on, let's start packing our shit up. We got to go. And this dude has been sitting in the corner by himself now, Mr. I can't feel it. And he's like, I don't think I can. And we're like, yeah, I know. I fucking told you, dude. See, you got too fucked up. We fucking told you. Like, I told you to slow down. Like, you were feeling it. You just didn't, like, I don't know. And I was like, but like now we got to fucking go. Like, they're going to be coming looking for this fucking room. We can't all be in here with this shit when, maid service shows up. So we got to get the fuck out of here. And this guy's like, no, but for real, I don't think I can get up. And Steve's like, well, you got to fucking try. And so this dude goes to stand up out of this chair, and when he goes to stand up, he goes right in the fucking floor. Oh, fuck. So we cart this fucking guy downstairs and put him in this woman's car. She takes him to a fucking ER immediately and found out that he had a fucking stroke. This guy was permanently fucking paralyzed on some portion of the left side of his fucking body. They said that, I guess, if I remember correctly, we found out down the line that he had weakened blood vessel in his fucking brain and that this shit was likely going to have happened anyway, but, a fucking gram of fucking dope in a 45-minute period was the catalyst ultimately that caused it to fucking burst, and they said the guy was fucking lucky as shit to be alive. Again, I'm getting all this fucking secondhand. I don't know the medical, I don't know how sound any of this data is medically. I just know that Steve called me, actually he didn't call me, he was with me, he got off the phone, and he gets this fucking phone call, and he's like, come on, we gotta go. And I'm like, what's wrong, dude? Where are we going? He's like, I gotta go to my storage building. And I'm like, why? And he goes, I gotta see if I got some crutches or a wheelchair or something. He was like, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? He's like, dude, that guy's permanently paralyzed on his left side. And dude started to fucking tear up. And this is where I realized, like, this guy is not your fucking stereotypical drug dealer. Like, this guy has a fucking heart, and he is feeling the emotional pain of what this guy did to himself. So there you have it. I'm about to run out of time. I barely got anything off in this video, but I will definitely come back with another one. Keep the fucking story going. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.